Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, yesterday, my last night, we played our second session of Circle of Hands. So excuse me, I'm going to have some delicious Diet A&W root beer, which is not the official drink of Circle of Hands, but it might as well be. Anyhow, it was pretty fun, and so as is our custom, we're going to do some reflections videos, reflections and recap. I haven't watched the other ones. I think Eloy made one, is uploading it, and Anthony will make his afterwards. So this is our second session with Anthony as the game master, and then the title is going to go on to me and then to Eloy, and we're going to do 2 sessions each. And I really hope that we continue the experiment, and I'll get to that hopefully in this reflections. This was a session, for me that was all about like scarcity, scarce resources, and it was both in-game and out-of-game. We simply didn't have enough time. We kind of knew going in that Anthony had something to go do, so we really could only play for about 2 hours. Last time we played, we joked and said it was 5 hours long. The entire video was almost 5 hours long. The actual play time probably was about 4 hours. And originally when we had made the pact, like what are we going to do, we were saying we're going to do like about 3-hour sessions, maybe like a hard stop at 3 hours. We did not succeed the first time. But I realized that for me to feel comfortable with this game, the way this game is set up, I really don't want to be constrained by that little amount of time. I want at least 3 hours, if not a little bit more, where nobody really has to go anywhere. Because part of the deal with playing Circle of Hands is you play it until it kind of feels finished, and you're not really sure where that's going to show up. It's not about, as Ron would say, about killing a Wumpus or finding the MacGuffin or all the other kind of stuff. It's not about accomplishing anything. It's about when it feels finished, when it's come to some kind of conclusion that you're all happy with, that feels right. And that may vary as far as like when that shows up. It might show up really early, but it might not. Anyhow, the session, Anthony did a really good job with moving the scenes on and really pacing the game, and that was something that we talked about because we felt like at times like we weren't pacing it well enough as a group. And certainly this time, where he just had a couple of hours, he really kind of had to end scenes and let's move ahead a few days and all that sort of stuff. And Anthony's really good at doing that, so it didn't feel rushed, even though we kind of knew we were doing it for 2 reasons. One, to kind of pace the game because we want to pace the game a little bit better, but also because we just didn't have a heck of a lot of time. So he did a really good job with that. So there was at no point did it really feel like that was I didn't feel rushed or pushed or like we didn't get the chance to do something. But once again, we were dealing with scarce resources. In the session itself, it opened up a little bit unconventionally in that you're kind of supposed to arrive at a place. And we sort of, open up, or Anthony opened up the session with us kind of already being there. And so it was very interesting the way we, had to make our first charm roll with 2 of the named characters, where we kind of already had been interacting with them. It was a little odd, but it worked. So, I wasn't, I was taken aback for a second, like wondering, I wonder exactly how we're going to do this. And it worked out just fine, and they hated us. Because that's the nature of charm rolls when you're using a single die. Especially when you don't have a charm of at least 6, you can't be successful at those, which is one of the neat things about Circle of Hands. There's a lot of times that you're failing, and failure is not always a great thing. But the situation that we found ourselves in was something that was really cool. In fact, it was very cold. It was winter. We were kind of snowed in. We were snowed in with the people of this garrison in this mountain pass. And because Circle of Hands deals with various social strata, the gentry and the professionals and the freemen, and then at the very bottom, the peasants, depending on which characters we actually chose, that would have determined where we actually were. Now, we had a couple characters that were, I think it was a freeman, the outdoorsman, and my character Ingolf, the one that I played, was a peasant. So we ended up in the village with these people that were freezing and starving to death. It's kind of funny because afterwards we realized that, had we chosen one of the gentry characters, that we would have been up in the keep, having a very, very different experience. Or if we had chosen one of each, we would have had, very different experience of this situation from 2 different angles, because one of the components which became very obvious was the idea of strife between the classes. And, where we were, it brought home like some more about the way that this game actually gets played. The first session that we had, I don't think we played it wrong. But we went to this place, we identified, after a time, something that was wrong, and we did something about it. We find ourselves in a similar situation here, but there was more of a feeling of helplessness. This idea that there was no food. Food was running out. That we and the people around us were struggling against the elements themselves. Winter is a really, really powerful thing to use in games. I've used it to great effect in games myself. I've had it used against me, not against me, but I've been a player where you're faced with something. Winter is something that you just don't think about in the modern day as being as brutal and as just really grim and gripping and dangerous and serious as it really is. And when you play in a game where winter is not to be taken lightly because it can actually kill you, and you don't have a nice warm car to get into and all that sort of stuff, and you can just call the oil man and they'll bring you some more oil or whatever it is, or I'll get more pellets for my pellet stove. It's a different feeling. There's no grocery store. And we found ourselves in a situation where we couldn't really do very much to help. And it became very evident, even in the first scene, we're there and we find people that have pretty much died. Because they're starving, it's obvious the husband has killed his entire family to stop them from suffering. And, there's an injury the wife has where, it's implied that they might have actually been engaging in some kind of cannibalism while an individual was still alive, just to feed the rest of the family. It definitely had this really grim tone, which is kind of funny because what Anthony told us later on was what he rolled up was squick. And I realized that my squick meter must be pretty darn high because the tone to me mostly felt grim, because it can go from, I think it's, it's like something harsh on the bottom, grim, and then squick. He definitely rolled up squick, but we were right like on the cusp. I always felt between grim and squick, but it felt very, very grim. But there was this pervading feeling of helplessness and despair in the session, and that's part of I think what Circle of Hands it's becoming more and more evident. The idea that you play sessions and over and over again. They have a beginning and an end. You're not playing a campaign. It's a very different feel. And I kept on having to remind myself that as a player, that whatever we do here, whatever we experience here, at the end of this session, that's the end of it. And there were a lot of elements that I started to notice in the situation with the two components that became obvious after a while, that you could tell that there was so much more that might be within those components, and we simply weren't able to explore them. Partly because of the way that our relationship with these other named characters had kind of ended up due to our charm rolls, partly because of our social class kind of interfering with that, partially because it was just really hard to get to the other place, to the garrison, where the actual gentry and soldiers were. And so I kept on thinking to myself today afterwards, like, had that been the beginning of a campaign, there would have been all sorts of rich things to go and explore. But the more I think about this, and the more I reflect upon my experience playing this twice already, and kind of projecting and thinking ahead, well, what would happen in continuous play? It becomes more and more evident the game, or at least the experience, isn't so much about the situations, about the stuff. It's about the characters and how they react to this sort of thing. And what makes it really kind of interesting is like it's still very introductory, at least for us in this game. Eloy and I played one of our original characters that we created, and then we had the option. We've got 4 characters in this pool right now. We decided that Anthony's were kind of off limits until he played them at least once. He should get the chance to maybe have them die, rather than us play them and killing them by accident. And because after that, they're community property. So we could have done a bunch of things. We could have played, the other, each other's characters, or what have you. But we ended up playing the other character we both created. And, I feel like we just haven't quite gotten to know who these characters are yet, which is fine, because that, to me, it's been my experience in games, that's what happens. And there are, things on the sheet that will tell me, like, the Ingolf is brutal and brave and shy. But I feel like we just haven't quite seen enough of these characters, and so I'm really, anxious is the wrong word, but I'm really looking forward to seeing them in play by different people, seeing, what sort of final personalities start to emerge, as these characters get fleshed out, as we see them play more and more often with more and more people. Playing Ingolf, I had those experiences like reacting to the session where there were times I realized I was reacting more as myself, and there were times I was reacting more as Ingolf. I even talked about it afterwards. I wish I had narrated more of him, even when he was pressing back against people that were irritating him. I wish I narrated him more like kind of looking at the ground and really just saying some things were pretty bold, but not really looking people in the eye, because that's part of the vibe that this character comes with, is this kind of shyness and almost a feeling, at least to me, of wanting to like redeem himself, but still he's a peasant, and character that maybe carries a little bit of shame. But that's the concept that started to suggest itself to me with him. But there were times when I wondered to myself, am I making him too bold? I'm not really sure, because perhaps at some point you just get pushed past your limits and you find things that are unacceptable, and you're going to speak your mind, even though it's not what you would normally do. Those times when we all find ourselves pushed past our limits. But there were some interesting things in the session. Forgive me, I'm tired, so I'm probably going to ramble a little bit. I noticed that I had some emotional reactions, especially when it came to the children. There was one scene with this little girl when we know she's going to die. She's going to freeze to death, and Eloy's character left her, and he tried to catch her but couldn't. And I imagine that Ingolf, the character I was playing, based on his background, probably would have not left her. Probably would have done everything in his power to catch her. And so, as a father, as somebody that like really loves kids, it was really difficult to watch and know what was going to happen. And Anthony, let us know that this, in fact, he comes back and he finds the frozen body of this little girl who has just died of exposure. And everything else that's happened up to that has endured starvation. The other scene where it's obvious this little boy has fed his family and the guests by killing his own dog, and things like that were. It was gripping. It wasn't necessarily a line or someplace I need to have veiled, but it was something where it really brought home the gravity of this situation, and especially. One of the things that I think Circle of Hands really brings out is this disparity. Not disparity, but just this complete divorcing of the experience of life between the different classes, especially when it comes to somebody as far removed as peasants and gentry. And just the conversations that Ingolf had with the gentry, where they were convinced that if they were baffled by this idea that like if all the farmers down in the fields freeze to death, you're going to die too, because you don't know how to make your own food. Like no new farmers are going to spring out of the soil. And this one named character, Liebrecht, was insistent that more farmers would come because it would be this great opportunity. And I wish I'd had some more time to express this idea that this is not what we're going to see as an opportunity. You're plowing the land that your grandfather plowed, and his grandfather before him. That's more honor to a peasant than. We're not gentry. We're not going to go look to make our own new nation. But it was completely. They wouldn't be able to understand that perspective. I was thinking about today the idea of the Iron Folk. The Crescent Land is so harsh that the only way the Iron Folk are going to survive is by banding together, and not just together within their own social strata, but all of the classes together. It's the only way that this garrison that is protecting Rolke is going to survive if the peasants and the gentry band together and all go share the food, all that sort of stuff, because that's the only way they're going to make it through the winter whole. But this was completely lost on them, and it was one of those things where it's a bit of social commentary that's happening at the same time. But I found it pretty compelling. One of the things that I wish we had more time, or wish we had more, more time to do, is I wish we had more time for the characters to talk to each other, to actually compare notes, to have those moments of deliberation. I'd have loved to have had some scenes, with Otto and Ingolf, and I don't mean engineering them, just mean like we get back together, and what do we do about this? because I think we were both coming to conclusions, but it felt more like we were acting as individuals rather than acting as the circle. This is another place I felt a little bit of having a scarce resource. I'm okay with the way we're playing the game now with the 2 players and the game master, but I wish, I think it would be richer if we had 3 players. I think 4 might be tops. It'd be due to the nature of hangouts and all that sort of stuff. But I wish there was a little bit more social dynamic going on. And it's not to say that I'm complaining. It's just something that I noticed. It seemed to be more of a scarce resource, and it's something that I really felt as though in the future I would enjoy more actual dialogue between the Circle Knights themselves. In terms of like, what do we do? I noticed that in our first game as well. When the other character kind of took the lead and said, I think we're going to do this. Talking afterwards, and Aloy said, my gosh, my character had this other idea. I would have loved to see Black Hadric and Falk Wolfram argue and come to some kind of agreement, or push a little bit. But then again, we were also running up against time at that point. One of the other things I noticed in the actual session was Anthony's Call of Cthulhu Roots show, and they show really, really strongly. And this is not a bad thing. He does a great job of conveying a situation which is really dark, which is really dismal, which really is really kind of hopeless, where you feel helpless. And so it was very, very appropriate. But he's very masterful at making that feel very, very real. And so what other things happened to me, like as a player, as I'm kind of watching myself play, as I'm watching this game unfold. I had to kind of remind myself or adjust my play style to realize that like we weren't really supposed to do anything. And by that I don't mean that there was a plotted or scripted adventure. That's not what I mean, because I actually really don't like that kind of stuff at all. But more that it wasn't. We weren't playing Pulp Heroics. We weren't playing Hollow Earth Expedition or All for One Regime Diabolique. It wasn't necessarily going to be one of these deals where we find something that's completely unacceptable, and we're going to blast our way through it. It's just not how this game works. It's not how the mechanics of this game work. It's not Pulp Heroics. The times when Ingolf was up at the fortress of the keep, if I'd started a fight, I would have died. We weren't superheroes. This was not that game. It wasn't that kind of feel. The feeling of helplessness and real like anger at the situation was very palpable. But also at the same time, as we're experiencing the real grim setting, the real despair, the hopelessness, it would have been okay for the session to kind of end with us just being observers of this kind of reality of life in the Crescent Lands, which I think to a large extent that was what most of the session happened to be. There was another element, the components of the adventure, which turned out to be a spoiler. Stop watching if you don't want to. There were ghouls, which we just kind of encountered evidence of. One character encountered evidence of, and then we eventually, this kind of session kind of ended with them showing up. And based upon, spoiler, certain things that happened, with gifts and what have you, we managed to live, which is great. But I think had we just simply observed what was going on and left, deciding we couldn't do anything, that would have been an okay way for the session to go. Because once again, it's not about us necessarily doing anything. It's not, there's something that just because we identify something that we find to be objectionable, doesn't mean that we necessarily are going to, that we can do anything about it. And it's not necessarily the game where, we decide, okay, well, we're just going to fight to the death and we're going to die trying. Maybe you do that sometimes, but maybe you just walk away. This is one of these situations where we almost died trying, but, that it didn't turn out that way. But I wonder what would have happened had it, gone on a little bit longer. Yeah, but the session was what the session was. One of the other things I noticed is, man, we are really loading up on Emborian at this point in terms of marks and gifts as a circle. So I'm hoping that we counter that with a little bit of Herbaja. It was fun because we saw our first unfulfilled oath. Eloy, playing Otto swears an oath that he will, not see these people starve or, prevent them from starving. He didn't do that. He filled up quite a bit on Emborium that way, and I think actually got a gift and a mark doing that. But then at the end of the session, he didn't fulfill that oath. So according to the rules, you take -1 permanently from one of your attributes, the attribute of your choice. So he has to decide which one that is for that character. The other thing is you take a mark of the appropriate color. And here's something, if Ron watches this, I have a question. I'm assuming that because it was a white oath, that he takes a mark of Emborian. But I wonder, gosh, does he take a mark of Urbaja because he didn't fulfill that oath of Emborian? I think the former, but just curious if it's really supposed to be the latter. In any event, he's got 2 marks of Emborian, as far as we know at this point. But yeah, our circle's loading up a little bit heavily on the white magic, and it's about being gray. It's about not really going one way or the other. So that's something I have a lot of interest in seeing where we go as far as that's concerned. Taking an oath, man, that's a way to really load up on color points really, really fast. It seems to be that's how you end up getting your marks pretty fast in this game. So oaths are not to be taken lightly. They're very powerful, but they have serious effects as well. Overall, at the end of the day, I enjoyed the session. It was very, very different. It was not necessarily about doing anything. I kept on feeling at the end of the day it was about being a witness. It was about being a witness to the reality of life in the Crescent Land, and it was about coming to terms with the extent of your ability to make change. The Circle Knights are supposed to be a force for social change, and in fact, the way the game is structured, we will be one way or the other. But it's almost a little humbling to realize that stepping into character that it's not pulp heroics. We're not playing 15th level, Dungeons and Dragons characters. We aren't going to be able to storm into the town and make things right every time. And then even when we do, sometimes we make them wrong. It's a little bit different. So there is that kind of human-sized element to this game, despite the fact that there's magic, where I think it's easier to put yourself, at least for me, it's easier to put myself in the shoes of these characters to kind of, at some point, that wall breaks and you kind of like enter into the character and the character becomes more real. And, left that session having that feeling of coming face to face with, just what my size was in that world as that character. How much influence I could really have. What could I really do about a situation? And those times where you're just so frustrated because there's nothing you can do. You can't fight against the superior forces of this garrison. You can't magically make food show up in the larders of the people. You can't raid and grab all this food from these other people that have taken it. You can't make the winter stop. You can't fight the elements. The best thing you can do is to hold on and hope that you survive. And it was, the session was very grim. Crossed over into Squick a couple times, but for me it was a very grim session. And something that, kind of opened my eyes a little bit more to how these sessions, not that they're going to go, but some of the things that they're going to show us. So, that's my impression. And I'm looking forward to running the game and doing my own venture preparation and seeing how Anthony and Eloy, what characters they choose and what actually happens. Because I haven't even rolled the dice to find out what's supposed to be in the place. But we'll find out.